This makes it easier to raise your taxes over and over again, forever and ever.
Anything that they can do to leverage our emotions, they do that so that we allow them to spend more money. And at some point, we're going to be taxed right out of the state.
This is more government meddling in how business is run in California.
They see a real problem, which is everything's so expensive. Rent, housing, gas, utilities, all so expensive, without thinking, wait, why is everything so expensive? Because of your stupid policies. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. This is a very, very exciting special episode. It is our voter guide episode. We've never done this before. We are going to give you information about how you should vote. Of course, everyone, you make your own decisions. It's free country, but we have opinions here on the Steve Hilton Show. And as you know, if you're a regular, we have fantastic people who are incredibly well informed about what's going on. And all of our regulars are here with us for this very special episode. So I'm so excited. I'm just going to go around as I'm seeing it on my screen here. Katy Grimes, Jennifer Horn, I call you Jen. I know Jennifer's I always say
Jen's
Jen.
great.
Jen Horn, Susan Shelley, amazing, amazing people. Everyone knows who you are. You're the best. And we're all together for the first time. So that itself is very exciting and special. And I'm going to do, so I brought all my stuff down here because it's all been arriving in the mail. Because of course we don't have election day anymore in California. We have election month or season, whatever. And so here, I brought it all with me. I've got this thing called the general election. It's a massive pamphlet with everything. And then this sample ballot, I don't know what that is. And then here's my actual ballot. If you can see people on video, I'm going to at a ceremony open my ballot. Here it is. It arrived in the mail. I'm not a dead person. This actually is me with my name on it. That's a good start. So, that's something. Here it is. I'm going to open my ballot. And then after today, I'm going to go and vote. And I'm actually going to... Yeah, because here we are, presidential general election. Very good. Here it is. And then, oh my God, it's so complicated. This is why we need this episode. All this stuff. Right. Okay. So, and Katy, I think you've got yours to hand, right?
Yes, I do. I just opened it this morning, making sure there were no surprises.
Very good.
Okay, so I don't know what the right way is to do. Mine is going to be different because I'm in the Bay Area, San Mateo County, and you're in Southern California. Katy's in Sacramento. Jen, you're in LA County. Susan, are you in Orange County?
No, I'm in LA County also.
You're in LA County as well. Okay, so you've all got slightly different. So let's go to the place where people really need help, which is all these ballot initiatives and propositions that we have here in California. And here we do need real information because there's so much misleading information out there and there's so much nonsense. And so I think that I want to start with that, and then we'll see if we have time for some of the other, the things that are on the ballot. But I'm just going to go in order, in numerical order. These are the statewide ballot initiatives. Everyone has these, wherever you're listening or watching in California. So let's start with the first one, Prop 2. I'm going to read what it says on my quick reference guide here. It says, Prop 2 authorizes bonds for public school and community college facilities, legislative statute. Susan, you take this one. We've talked about it before. I think I'm teeing it up for you, I think.
Okay, this is terrible. This is a $10 billion bond for school facilities. Enrollment is declining and is projected to continue declining. And they are also still telling us they have to get the asbestos out of the walls and the lead out of the water. And I just have to tell you, they've had $54 billion in state bonds for K through 12 since 1998. If there's still asbestos in the walls and lead in the water, who's going to prison for it? This is just a scam. What this does is it allows matching funds for local bonds, which means nobody gets the money except for very, very low income districts. Nobody gets any money unless they do a local tax increase. You will get a local property tax increase for local bonds in order to get any of that money from the state. And it's first come, first serve. So the rich districts with the consultants can get in there early and grab the money, and you'll just be left with the tax increase. Thank you very much. So no on Proposition 2.
No on Prop 2. Jen?
I am also a no on Prop 2. What's interesting is that the Republican Party has endorsed Proposition 2. And I thought it was pretty surprising because if you look at this, again, it's about more money that should already be spent on the schools. We've already done this. It's time for them to use the money they have.
Yes, exactly. I mean, why, schools is about half the state budget. It's the sort of main thing that state government, there's also lots of terrible things that state government does, but in terms of just the size of the budget, it's already half the budget, but roughly. So what is this about, Katy?
This is another way for our governor and legislature to avoid having to use the budget to fund the things that should be funded by the budget. That's all bondage
Great.
are to me.
Exactly. It's amazing to me that the GOP was for this. I'm a hard no, as they say. But there's another thing I just want to talk about here. This is because this is a big one. It's the first one on the ballot. So, and I really want to understand how this is even possible. So I've been seeing some ads for this on TV. I don't know if you all have. And in those ads, it literally says, without, I'm quoting from the ads, it has all the nice pictures of the school, has some bad pictures, crumbling schools and then nice schools, and we're going to spend the money on schools. And then it literally says, quote, without raising taxes. That's a quote from the ad. Okay.
Very, very misleading. Very
Yeah.
It's a lie. It's a total lie. And here is the actual, this is the reference guide from the state government. And I'm going to read what it says in the summary, which is prepared by the Attorney General, a Democrat. I mean, we can talk about that being outrageous itself, but here, and it says here, fiscal impact. I'm quoting, increased state costs of about $500 million annually for 35 years to repay the bond. So how is that not, where do they think the money's coming from?
It's a technicality.
How can they say in the ad without, and then on the screen it says no new taxes? How
Isn't
can
it
they
the
say?
B word? Susan would,
What?
and Susan, you would know it's the B word. It's bond, right? They always try to
Bond,
pass
right.
that off. When they say bond, that means you're totally going to take it, but they can tell you that it's not going to cost taxpayers anything.
Exactly. It's going to cost taxpayers double the $10 billion because you have to
Yes.
pay it back with interest. So this is the most expensive way to pay for anything. What you really want to do is pay for school construction out of the budget, which they've done to some extent. But when we had our $100 billion surplus, they did not prioritize getting the asbestos out of the walls and the lead out of the. You would think that they would have prioritized that. But either this is just a giant scam where there is no asbestos, but they're telling you that, or they are so incompetent and corrupt that they're not fixing the schools. And it could be a combination of both.
But is there a legal case? I'm sorry to, go on about it, but it's not just misleading. It's a lie. It says here
It's
from the Attorney
technically
General, repaid the bond, right? Who's going to repay? How's that going to happen other than through taxes?
out of the general fund by cutting something else. That's the
I
technicality.
see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you will get a local tax increase with this, which is the part they don't want to talk about. You will get local property tax increases for local school bonds to do the local match in order to get these state funds. So that's where the tax increase is.
Well, hard no. Okay, on prop 2. All right, prop 3. I'm just going to go in order. Constitutional right to marriage, legislative constitutional amendment. I think that this may be one where we have a little disagreement. I haven't spent any time on this. I haven't looked at it. Everyone probably knows by now I'm in favor of marriage equality. We actually introduced it as a conservative government back in the day in the UK. I'm a libertarian on this kind of stuff. I really always have been. But let's go around. Katy, what do you think about this one?
I was suspicious as to why this was even on the ballot, because California has obviously embraced marriage equality for years. Our governor, of course, was notorious for having done that as a mayor in San Francisco. So I actually reached out to the California Family Council because they were a hard no on it, and I thought I'd try to find out why. Well, they say that this is actually kind of a very devious ballot initiative. They had Dean Broyles, president of the Center for Law and Policy, do an analysis on it. And he said there's some really concerning, kind of far-reaching implications of this amendment. And it's a constitutional amendment. And said, while it might seem far-fetched, he lists a number of various marriage possibilities which this would allow, including polyamorous marriages, dogs and cats marrying. I mean, it sounds silly, but why would we enshrine that in the state constitution? I don't think anybody has a problem getting married in California. So I don't even think it should be on the ballot, but because it is, I'm a no for it.
Okay. It says here, and in terms of the arguments for it, I'm looking at, again, I'm just going from this guide that everyone gets sent. It says it removes discriminatory language from the California Constitution stating marriage is only between a man and a woman.
If that's all it did, that would be
Right.
fine, but it does much more than that.
Susan.
It adds language that says there is a right to marry. There's a fundamental right to marry. It's my understanding that this does not change who can get married in California. That's what the legislative analyst wrote. So I think what's happening here is they're taking out language that offends same-sex couples and people who are in families with same-sex couples. And they look at that and they say, well, the California Constitution says marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's not what the Supreme Court says, and this is offensive to us, and we want that language out. I think
Yeah, it
that's
says
what's
on
going
both
on.
sides what your vote means, yes and no. The last sentence says there would be no change in who can marry. So I don't know, Jen, what do you think?
I think it's interesting because no one wants to take a position on this one. Every ballot guide you look at, it says neutral, neutral, neutral. I do take a position on this one, as Katie does. And here's the thing, Stevie, and we've talked about this. I have no problem with gay marriage. I don't think it should be the sword for us to die on. I want government out of all marriage, by the way, for us. I just don't think it needs to be there. But what this does is it wants to change the state constitution. So we have to ask ourselves, is it worth changing the state constitution? It's not going to make anybody get married any faster. It's not going to have anything to do with whether or not anyone can get married, but it is going to offer a lot of gray area. And we know this will probably happen once or twice, but there's always someone who's going to want to marry a unicorn, or who's going to want to have their goat marry their cat, or they're going to want to use this because it's now somehow put into the state constitution. So because it doesn't infringe on anybody's rights, I'm saying no, because I think that we need to let the state constitution live as it
All
is.
right. Well, that's it's an interesting one. It's more of a sort of conscience one than some of these other ones. So we'll see. All right, let's go on because we got quite a lot to get through. This is Prop 4. I'm just reading now. I mean, it's interesting because some of these we've already talked about on this show, and some of them I'm familiar with, and others I'm really not. So this is actually very helpful for me. I hope it's helpful to the audience as well. This is Prop 4, and I'm just going to again read the title, and then we'll dive into it. Prop 4 authorizes bonds for safe drinking water. Here we go. Wildfire prevention and protecting communities and natural lands from climate risk. Legislative statute. All right. Katie.
This is a grab bag for climate change, the climate change grift in the state of California. Again, because it's a bond, this stuff should be funded out of the state budget. I go back to the city of Porterville, which, as long as I have been covering politics in the state of California, hasn't had fresh water to drink. And the legislature has had every ability in 20 plus years to budget some money for the city of Porterville. So the answer is not in a bond situation. This should be funded out of the state budget. And I am very, very concerned about what else they would be spending this on, because we know climate change is just this soft umbrella of, unimaginable things.
I just want to say something on climate. They throw this in. I just put this on X, I think last night, and maybe reposted it this morning, which is what's infuriating to me as someone who really has always cared about the environment and nature and our beauty, especially here in California. It's one of the things that's amazing about California. This extremism on climate change is actually giving environmentalism a bad name.
Yes.
And so I said we've got to rescue love of nature from these climate extremists, because it's just not the same thing. I mean, that's just way beyond that. It's nothing to do with that. It's just this extremism. And it's another bond, Susan. And let me again read the fiscal impact. So the last one we talked about 2 propositions ago, it said $500 million to be repaid annually for 35 years. Here we are, this one. Increased state cost of about, I'm quoting, increased state cost of about 400 million annually for 40 years. So we're already nearly at $1 billion. We've hardly got started.
As Katie said, this is a grab bag of pork. This has things in it like van pool vehicles for agricultural workers. Well, you want to take out a 40-year car loan? I don't think so. This is debt. This is the state credit card, and everything's going to cost twice as much when you pay it back with interest. So it's paying for things like pop-up tents at farmers markets. It's paying for development of offshore wind energy, which there isn't any because it's a federal issue with international waters involved. There's no project, there's no approval. It's going to be another bullet train where they're going to have consultants writing reports telling us how far behind schedule it is, and you're going to pay for that with interest. So no
And they
on
make
pork.
it, Jen, they make it sound so, like this one, safe drinking water. Who's
No.
against that? What, it's just, that's what's so annoying. But I mean, what do you think?
If you like to breathe and you like the birds, you must vote for this. It's just build a giant hole and throw our money in it. This can cost, I've seen reports, up to $10 billion in the total once this is all done. And here's the thing that's insulting, Steve. It's something that we've talked about as we've done your show before. And that is, we need infrastructure in this state to capture water. We need to solve a water
Yes.
problem. This is all focused on the cleanliness of water. And look, I want clean drinking water. I'm not trying to downplay this. I want to be as environmentally friendly as we can be. But if you're going to spend the kind of money they're talking about in this proposition, we need to start talking seriously about water infrastructure.
Yes. I mean, by the way, it's amazing. They want, I just got a little rant on this, right? We already pay the highest taxes in America, and they're telling us that and these Democrats constantly brag about we're the fifth biggest economy in the world. Can't be that bad in California. We're the fifth biggest economy. And they say, but we don't have we can't guarantee safe drinking water. And it's not just, I mean, Porterville that puts a place on it. But then the last number I saw, Katie, was you have 1 million people in California without access to safe, clean drinking water. 1 million people. What is going on that we have the highest taxes in the country? They've doubled the budget of the state of California in the last 10 years after inflation, even as our population is flat or falling. We're not quite double, I mean, nearly doubled. It's got up 17, I'll give you the exact number, 79%. It's like, not that long ago, the state budget was under 100 billion. Now it's 330 billion. So where's all the money going that we still need more money for just to have something basic like safe drinking water? It's an outrage.
It is. We know where the money is going. It's going to the special interest groups that sponsor their individual legislators. They're not spending it on the things their constituents actually need or want.
Yeah. And then they want more. All these things are tax increases. Here's another one. I mean, it's a real theme here. Susan,
Yeah.
I really want you to hit this one because I know you know this intimately, this issue. This is Prop 5.
Yes.
You can, again, read, in fairness, just read what it says. Allows local bonds for affordable... here we go. Allows local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with 55% voter approval. Legislative constitutional amendment. All right, take this one.
This makes it easier to raise your taxes over and over again, forever and ever. Forever. What this does is it takes away a constitutional taxpayer protection that was established at the gold rush era. In 1849, the legislature was directed to stop the cities from creating excessive debt and abusive assessments. And in 1879, they put it in the Constitution as a 2/3 vote approval for local debt. And this legislature doesn't like it because it's too hard to raise taxes. Local debt is a property tax increase. And they make it easier and they create more agencies that can put these bonds on the ballot for more purposes, everything from regional associations of governments to transit agencies to fire stations, libraries, parks, to buy open space, to do all kinds of things. And it's not even limited. It says including but not limited to. So all of these bonds, which will all sound sugar-coated wonderful, will be on your ballot every election forever. And instead of requiring a 2/3 vote, they'll pass with 55%. And your property taxes will go up after every election. And then they're coming back because they want to lower, according to the author of Prop 5, she wants to lower the threshold for new taxes also, not just bonds, but new taxes like sales taxes and hotel taxes and all these other things, parcel taxes. She wants to cut that to 55% because it's just too hard to raise taxes. And they want to make it easier. And that's what they're saying. So no on 5. Big no on 5.
Big. I mean, this is a really, really serious one because all the other ones we've looked at, they're this year's bonds, and that's bad enough. This is higher taxes for eternity.
Forever.
Forever. Okay, Chen.
Yeah, no, I don't think I could say it any better than Susan. This is ongoing. That is really important to note. This is the one that before you popped on, Steve, Katie, and I were having a conversation saying that I think voters are getting fooled by this one. This is why Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association exists. And I'm telling you, my little sneak, every time I'm going through these propositions, as I look where Howard Jarvis is, this is the one, as Susan will tell you, is probably the most important, I think, on our ballot. To protect ourselves and to protect our property taxes from going up in perpetuity.
Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, if we think the cost of living in California is already bad, imagine what this would do to us. Our property taxes do go up already every year. I live in a county that is monkeying around with our property values and doubled the value of a piece of property my husband and I own, which clearly isn't. So this is an open checkbook for our irresponsible legislature.
It's really serious. I mean, especially right now when we have this kind of, one party rule and the supermajority in the legislature and so many I mean, this is a very, very big deal. By the way, just remind you talk about the importance of Howard Jarvis, which I totally agree with. So guess where I was? I was on a trip with my son and his friend and his family to Nashville. We went to see a band. So guess who I saw on Friday, spent a really long time with talking about all California's issues on Friday. Guess who's in Nashville? Do you know?
Oh, huh.
Susan I thought you might know.
I
Art
don't.
Laffer.
Oh, yes,
So
he
Art
wants to
Laffer,
establish a Howard Jarvis type of organization there, doesn't he?
Yeah.
right? And
And
it was really interesting because I hadn't appreciated. I'd never met him in person, and he'd been a guest on my show. Amazing, amazing man. And I had no idea his history in California and how much he's been in this fight to stop taxes going up in California, right back to the original Prop 13 days and so on. So I had a lot of education from him about all of this just now, just on Friday. I must put the picture out. Actually, we have a nice picture of me and him with this book he wrote about how to save California. All right, let's go on. Prop 6. This is, I'm going to read it. Eliminates constitutional provision allowing involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons, legislative constitutional amendment. Now, Susan and I, you and I discussed this the other week, but for those who haven't heard, you did the last one. So, Jen, do you have a view on this one?
I do. I was a no on this one, and I'll explain. It's not that I'm a mean slave driving Californian. That's not the purpose of this at all. But I think there's some things that save people when they actually make it to prison or to jail in California, and that is religion and work. And I think the fact that people could not be compelled to work in a jail situation is actually going to do them some harm. And so I'm not going to go with the change to this amendment. I'm not going to change the state constitution. I'm a no on this one. I think there are things that can be done to fairly and humanely help people in situations to find some self-worth and value through hard work.
Katie.
yeah, awesome. You're right. This was actually one of the 14 reparations bills that
Yeah.
our state legislature ran this year, all
Oh,
of which crashed and burned. Other than this, lawmakers in California claim that work in prison is forced labor. They call it slavery in the bill. And they think that our incarcerated members of society shouldn't be forced into labor. And as Jen said, well, you could interview a lot of people who've done time, who either learned a trade or just were busy every day, and it kept them out of trouble and helped them focus. And to call this slavery in prison, the purpose of incarceration is to remove people from society where they can pay their debt for the crime they committed. I think hard work is part of that.
and the other part of it is rehabilitation, just from a
Sure.
practical, pragmatic point of view. Recidivism, which is the term for, repeat offending, is a big proportion of our crime rates in California. It's like over 40% of the crime is repeat criminals. So if they're in jail and you rehabilitate them and you give them skills so that that's actually helping to reduce crime. Seems to me this is actually arguing against that, Susan.
Yes, and what they're arguing is that work is not rehabilitation. Only going to classes is rehabilitation, which is kind of a silly argument. Well, we don't have enough time for classes if they work. But there's a huge cost that they're not acknowledging in their arguments, and that is that there were a number of Supreme Court decisions in California that said prison employees are not employees for the purpose of minimum wage. People who work in prison are not entitled to minimum wage. That is based on these words in the Constitution that Prop 6 would take out. So those decisions fall. And if those decisions fall, then inmates who work, and by the way, they work on things that run the prison. So if you're paying the minimum wage, it's going to cost billions of dollars. If you bring in someone else to do the work, it's going to cost billions of dollars. And if those decisions fall that say they don't have to be paid minimum wage, then it's going to be very expensive for taxpayers. Even if a state law says they don't have to be paid state minimum wage, there's a federal minimum wage. So that's what's going to happen. And that's
So
according to the
interesting.
Senate Appropriations Committee. That's not me
So
saying that.
basically, they're going to you can't force people to work anymore. You can't, and if they don't want to participate, you can't make them. But if they do work, they're going to be paid minimum wage,
Right.
which is going. I mean, actually, I'm looking here. I mean, it's so easily the fiscal impact here. It says potential increase or decrease in state and local costs depending on how work for people in state prison and county jail changes.
Well,
Amazing.
there will
Okay.
be litigation. This is what the Senate Appropriations Committee said. They
Right.
called it anticipated litigation, and we know how that's going to come out. So the undisclosed cost of Prop 6 is billions of dollars a year, not just at the state level, but also at the county level.
Right. So here's the thing. The next one we're going to get to is Prop 32. So this is an interesting point I just want to hit because I hadn't been aware of that till this year. I just read this the other day, which is the numbering system. So we go from Prop 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it jumps to Prop 32 is the next one. And that is significant, isn't it? So Susan, tell us about the significance of the. By the way, I can't say that word significance now without thinking of Kamala Harris's word salad. The significance of she says it all the time. She's ruined that phrase. Why is it? Let me rephrase. Why is it important to be aware of the numbering system? What do the low numbers, propositions, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, mean compared to the others?
The legislature passed a special bill to give the things that they put on the ballot priority, so they'd be at the top. So that's what happened there. They picked their own numbers. It's like
Right.
a roulette game with a slanted wheel, and they picked their own numbers. And then at 32, those are the citizen initiatives that were put on the
Right.
ballot with signatures on petitions, and that's the numbering system that's continuous from the previous election.
Isn't that amazing? Just all these things you learn. So low, because I saw someone say, well, if it's got a low number, that means it's put there by the legislature, so vote no. It was a sort of quick kind of guide.
Good
Hey, so
advice.
far so good, actually, with that piece of advice.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's go to, well, I think we know the answer. This one. Prop 32 raises minimum wage initiative statute put on the petition by petition signatures. Jen, what's this one about?
Yeah, so Prop 32 would raise the minimum wage to $17 an hour for the remainder of 2024, $18 an hour starting in January of 2025, and it's a bump from where we are at $16 an hour in the state. So, Steve, this one's important to me. I run a small business as well as do radio. I've talked to you about that. We've already seen what raising the minimum wage has done to the fast food industry in California. Fast food workers making $20 an hour has not necessarily created riches for everybody. What it's done is it's cut people's hours. It's eliminated positions. It's put in kiosks instead of human beings. And it's made a lot of restaurants go out of business. And so for people who are struggling already in a business environment that is unfriendly to say the least in California, this one has to be a no for me as well, because I just don't think businesses need any more to have to live up to. And honestly, I might be an outlier here, but I actually think there's an argument to be made to get rid of the minimum wage in general, but that's probably a conversation for a different day.
You can do an initiative and get it on the ballot for next time.
It'll be Prop 247 in today's
Exactly. Exactly. All right, Katie, what about this one, Prop 32?
Yeah, I agree with the abolish the minimum wage. And so would Milton Friedman if he was sitting here with us. As Jen said, we've seen what a disaster the $20 fast food minimum wage has been, despite the gaslighting from the governor's office about it. Oh, we're succeeding. We've added thousands of jobs in the fast food industry, which is a just outright lie. This is more government meddling in how business is run in California. And the bottom line with the minimum wage is we are all old enough. We probably had a minimum wage job in high school and college. And all it is supposed to do is get you that entry-level job in which you learn skills at work. You learn how to be an employee. You learn how to serve the public. There's not a lot of value on that entry-level job until you have some skills. And so abolishing the minimum wage, Jen, I totally agree with. I mean, this just costs our businesses more and more. And frankly, every time the state forces increased wages, fees, regulations, et cetera, that means those businesses either can't buy additional equipment to support their business, they can't hire more employees, they have to lay off employees in many cases, and some just end up shutting down because they run such thin margins. And this will contribute to more of that.
Susan.
It does cost businesses a lot more. It costs them in the payroll taxes and all the rest that go with the higher wage. And it also costs the government because the government employs a
Yes.
lot of minimum wage people, and then your taxes go up because the labor costs of government go up. So it's very expensive, and it's not really something that should be done with an initiative.
Exactly. And it's just to underline that fiscal impact on this ballot guide from the AG, state and local government costs could increase or decrease by up to hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Oh, just hundreds of millions. I mean, our sort of totals going up quite nicely. A couple of points I wanted to add. First of all, this is symptomatic of just the completely wrong mentality we're in California with these Democrats, which is they see a real problem, which is the cost of living is so high. And so, it's so expensive. Everything's so expensive. Rent, housing, gas, utilities, all so expensive. So we got to raise the minimum wage so people can live, without thinking, wait, why is everything so expensive? Because of your stupid policies. Why don't we actually do something to cut the price of gas? So that's less in terms of your living costs, or the utilities, or all of these things are made more expensive by their regulations and their taxes and their policies. So we're in this kind of doom loop of their policies make everything more expensive. So they raise the minimum wage so people can cope. That in turn makes everything else more expensive. It's so bad. It's so stupid and self-defeating. The other thing I found interesting on here, it says, it lists when you got this voter guide, it lists the supporters and opponents, the main ones. Under supporters, it says none submitted.
I noticed.
So who's this from anyway?
Yeah.
Opponents: California Chamber of Commerce, California Restaurant Association, California Grocers. I mean, this is an absolute no. And we've got to deal with the cost of living crisis that we have by getting rid of the taxes and regulations that make everything so expensive in the first place. Right, next one. Prop 33 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. Susan.
This is a disaster. This is the third time it's been on the ballot from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation to try to allow cities to do radical rent control. We have a 1995 law on the books in California to protect property owners in the rental housing business. It's called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. And it says you can't put rent control on single-family homes or condos. It says that when a tenant moves out voluntarily, the landlord has the right to reset that rent. Under the rent control law, the landlord has the right to reset that rent to market value for the next tenant. And then that is under rent control from there. What this would do is allow cities to put any kind of rent control on single family homes, vacancy control, anything they want to do. And that will destroy the rental housing business, because even if nobody enacts one, somebody could. And it's a long-term investment to buy rental property and be in that business. So you would want to get out of that business, because you could see somebody running for city council and say, you know what, that person and two more just like that person could be on that city council. And in 2 years, my business is destroyed. I'm not taking out a 30-year mortgage to buy this. It'll destroy rental housing in California.
Jen.
Yeah, we already have a shortage. This is going to make people want to sell their properties, not rent them. You know, it used to be that if you had a starter home, that you would try to hold on to that, and that you would try to put that into the market for rental. You move on to your next house. I think this is just another reason people will either up and leave California, or just put more into the real estate market and forget the rental business. Government out of people's private business. And that's why I am a no on this one.
It's a disaster. So I completely see that. It will everyone agrees you've got a massive housing crisis, the number one reason people are leaving the state. It's another example. Instead of actually addressing the reasons that we have that, which is a combination of these, we've talked about this before. I did a lot of work on it. The impact fees, which are taxes on house building, there's a direct tax that increases the price, and all these environmental laws that make it impossible to build anything. So you don't have enough supply. This would make it even worse. You'd have less supply. It's so stupid. Katy, could you address the question that a lot of people ask me, is like, what's this got to do with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation? What's that all about?
Actually, I have no idea. I was wondering the same thing. Does anybody know?
They've been in the housing business. They've been cited for various slumlord types of violations. And I honestly, I don't know why they're doing this, but this is the third time they've done it. They've spent a fortune, and the apartment associations have had to spend a fortune to oppose it. The voters turned this down twice before, something like 60-40 or 55-45. So this is the third try. And one thing this would do that the others didn't do is this would forbid the state from ever again enacting landlord protections of this type. So that this would require the apartment industry to go back to the ballot in order to be able to protect property owners from radical rent control at the city level. So this is particularly bad, and no on 33.
I think it would also freeze construction. I think you will see no
Yeah.
more new housing construction or apartment construction, which is where a lot of investment groups like to purchase things. This will just kill it.
So I think this is connected to the next one. There's this guy, Michael Weinstein, who's involved in all of this. And I think the next one, Prop 34, is hitting back at 33. Anyone know anything about this? Prop
Yeah.
34 restricts spending of prescription drug revenues by certain healthcare providers.
Which are described to be exactly matching the AIDS Healthcare Foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is this? What's going on here? Is this 34? Because I'm noticing here that in terms of the opponents of Prop 34 restricting the spending of prescription drug revenues, one of the opponents is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which is behind number 33. So is it that this one is trying to stop the AIDS Healthcare Foundation from doing things like rent control?
Exactly. That's exactly what it's doing. And there's a prescription drug discount program that the Healthcare Foundation uses. Many organizations do, and they buy drugs at a discount, and then they bill the government or the insurance companies for the higher price, and they get a spread from that. They get profits from that. This would say that you would have to spend that money on your core mission, which would be patient care in this case, and you could not spend that money on, just as one example, putting rent control measures on the ballot 3 times. So this is directly targeted at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation's political activities that have made property owners very angry, and this is kind of a revenge measure.
Very good. And exactly. And actually, the argument against this one, is from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Says the California Apartment Association, representing billionaire corporate landlords, doesn't care about patients. Their sole purpose is silencing AIDS Healthcare Foundation, the sponsor of the rent control initiative. 34 weaponizes the ballot, is a threat to democracy. Oh my God. Threat to democracy. By the way, this is from the people who overturned Huntington Beach's voter ID initiative. I mean, they have no standing to lecture anyone on threat to democracy, and took the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act that you were so involved in, Al Jarvis, Susan, off the ballot. I mean, it's outrageous. So it sounds like we are no on 33, yes on 34. And that's a
Correct.
sort of double
Yes,
whammy.
isn't that exciting? Your first yes? So well,
It's a yes. It's a yes.
Very good. Okay, let's get. There's only 2 more left. We're nearly there. Prop 35. What's this? Provides permanent funding for Medi-Cal healthcare
Steve,
services.
can I tell you a funny story about Prop 35?
Yes.
So I was putting together, I think we all have our own voter guide. So, a couple weekends ago, I was sitting here, I had all my stuff out in front of me, and I was reading and reading and reading. And I think Prop 35, somehow I just came back to it last because I knew exactly what I was going to do on Prop 36, which is our last proposition. I'm going through this thing, and I must have read it 74 times. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm calling Susan Shelley. So I think you have to let Susan tell us about this one, because thank God she sent me her whole workup on Prop 35 because it was ridiculous.
Okay, Susan, let's do it.
Okay, so Prop 35 takes a managed care organization tax, which the legislature passed and the governor signed. It's temporary. It's a tax on like Anthem, Blue Cross, and managed care organizations. It directs the money to healthcare providers, to the hospitals, to the healthcare workers, to various groups in the healthcare industry. They're selling it to us as making the tax permanent to fund Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is very much underfunded and it's been overexpanded. There are 14 million people on this safety net health insurance program, a third of the state. It's supposed to be for very low income people. A third
Yeah.
of the state qualifies for that. So the providers are not compensated well enough to see the patients. The reimbursements are just too low. So we do need a solution where the Medi-Cal providers are paid enough to see the Medi-Cal patients. This isn't it. What this does is it makes the tax permanent and then it directs it into interest groups. The private ambulance companies have their own pot of money. Planned Parenthood has its own pot of money. The unions, the healthcare workers' unions, get a big chunk of it that's entirely for pay raises. The money is just dedicated for pay raises. They call it retention of the workforce, but it's pay raises. And so it locks it all in a ballot measure, which means it really can't be changed if it isn't working. And then you're going to need something else to fund Medi-Cal providers because not enough of it is going where it really needs to go, which is to the doctors. So I'm a no on this.
Okay, good. Thank you for explaining. Katy.
I am a no for the exact same reasons because I looked up Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association's position on this and put it right into my ballot recommendations.
Right.
This was one, the reason it was so confusing, Steve, is not only are you reading about Medi-Cal, and we all acknowledge that there's problems with Medi-Cal, and we all think that we need to make fixes. Here's what's weird. I'm going to blow your mind. The California Republican Party is supporting this initiative. Gavin Newsom is the no on this one. And so you're like, am I agreeing with
What?
Gavin Newsom here to take away power from the legislature? And then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, every once in a while you have to. So that's what you
So
do.
what is that about? That's really interesting.
Well, he wants to
What?
keep the money for his own budgeting. He wants that managed care organization tax to be
I
his
see.
money to spend, and the hospitals and the other providers they want to lock that away from Gavin Newsom and spend it themselves. But this is not a good solution.
So it's
No.
basically this is another. It's not a tax increase. It's maintaining a tax. What's the right way to think about that?
Well, the tax would expire, but in Sacramento, everyone seems to think the tax will be made permanent one way or another by the legislature. So
Makes permanent the existing tax. Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So this makes it permanent and directs it to the healthcare providers. And Governor Newsom would like to make it permanent and direct it to his own priorities.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I just think there's a sort of basic point here, which is as I keep coming back to, we have the highest tax in the country. They've doubled the budget. Everything's worse. They don't need any more money from us. They need less money. We need to give them less money, not more. I mean, seems to me.
definitely.
And by cutting spending, I mean, you're not just sort of giving and why has this happened? Because the government's got so bloated, and that's why everything is such a mess, and it's impossible to do anything. All right, last one. I think this is going to be the easiest one. Which is good. We end on a high note. Prop 36. Yes. All right. Who wants to start?
I was just going to say, this is the one I'm most excited about. I'll just set the stage. Prop 47 was one of the worst things that we did for our safety in California. Thank you, Kamala Harris and George Gascon and the whole gang. And this is clearly not enough. This is not going to save any of us. But Prop 36 is going to make it a little bit better for repeat offenders to actually see some punishment. And it just has to be a yes. We have to do something.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody is immune from the rampant retail theft that we're experiencing in this state. Doesn't matter if you're in a big city or a smaller city, it's happening everywhere. And this is very targeted specifically to the gangs that are doing retail theft. It'll total up how much they're, ripping a city off in a matter of weeks and then impose actual penalties. I think I nicknamed it the Make Crime Illegal Act.
So, Susan, just not to repeat everyone else's points, I'd love to put to you the argument against, and maybe you can engage with that, because it's amazing that, and it's an interesting one, because first of all, the overwhelming public support, all the polling shows like massive majority in favor of this, even though there hasn't been big ad spend or anything. I haven't seen any ad on it actually. And yet, the first poll that came out had it up, yes, 71%, others a little bit less than that, but in the same ballpark. And it is genuinely bipartisan. You have the mayors of, like big San Francisco, London Breed, Democrat, San Jose, Matt Mahan, Democrat, all for this. And yet Gavin Newsom is against it. It feels like the establishment, the Democratic establishment is against it. I'm going to read the argument against it. Don't be fooled. Prop 36 will lead to more crime, not less. It reignites the failed war on drugs, making simple drug possession a felony, and wastes billions on prisons while slashing crucial funding for victims, crime prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. This puts prison first and guts treatment. It's all just
That
not
is such
true,
a
is it?
lie. That is
Yeah.
Yeah.
such a lie. If you read through the initiative, they tell you that people will be compelled to either see prison time or get treatment. This could actually save lives. And Gavin Newsom's weak argument is that he's going to have prison overpopulation in the state of California. He doesn't realize that if you don't punish anybody for crimes, everybody will commit them. Having a little bit of law and order in California will be a good thing. And by the way, incentivizing people to get help for their drug addiction
Of
is
course.
also a good thing in every place but Gavin Newsom's
Which I
California.
thought he was for. I thought that was the whole point of his
Right.
initiative that he barely got through in March. Susan, what do you think of that?
Well, the governor doesn't want anyone to be sentenced to prison ever because he thinks that he should close the prisons or turn them into tennis camps or something like that. So he doesn't want anything to allow more prison sentences. But really, Prop 36 is pretty mild. It doesn't repeal Prop 47. It doesn't turn every drug possession into a felony. What it does is it allows on the third offense more severe sentencing. It doesn't require it, but it allows judges to do more severe sentencing. And in some cases, that's appropriate. And it does create an incentive to seek treatment and to go into a drug rehab program instead of prison, which is a good thing. Because one of the things we've heard from prosecutors since Prop 47 passed is that they've lost the leverage they had to get people into treatment. So it doesn't do that much. It's pretty mild compared to the way it's been portrayed even by some of its supporters. It's not a complete repeal of Prop 47. It's not mass incarceration unleashed on California. It's not a three strikes law. It's just putting some sensible changes in place that allow prosecutors and judges to sentence people on a third offense more severely, which is appropriate, I think.
So we got to the end of the statewide initiatives. I got a couple of questions I'd love to check in with you on, because we obviously aren't going to be able to, it doesn't make sense to go through our local ones. But where you have, I mean, I think this is a simple one, Susan. I mean, I think when we talked with your colleague, John Kupal, the other day, and he told me, or you can't remember, one of you said, on this ballot in November across the state of California, if you add them all up, there are a total of around 470 tax increases on the ballot in the form of not just the statewide bonds we've talked about, but all the local ones, county. And can you just talk to that a little bit and give people a guide as to how they should vote on those?
Well, generally speaking, we're always no on these bonds because we think that the important priorities should be funded in the budget and not on the credit card. And so you should always call up your representatives and say, what did you spend our money on that you didn't spend it on fire stations? You didn't spend it on this and all these high priorities, and you need to borrow money for that. So be very skeptical of these claims for bonds. And the big thing to watch out for is what we're calling the upland taxes. There is a loophole that the courts have created in the constitutional protection in Prop 13. It's supposed to take a 2/3 vote to pass a local tax for a special purpose. But the courts have said if it's a citizens' initiative tax increase, maybe the Constitution doesn't apply. And maybe it can pass with a simple majority. This is being fought in the courts. This would have been fixed by the Taxpayer Protection Act, which the courts took off the ballot because they thought it did too much. Protecting taxpayers is just too much for the California Supreme Court. So this is a loophole. Watch out for these because these are citizen initiative tax increases, many of them really from the government using these groups as a front. That's what's going on in Los Angeles with Measure A, which is a sales tax increase for homelessness programs permanently. Permanently, $1 billion a year permanently. And it's a so-called citizens initiative tax increase. So it will pass with a simple majority. Watch out for those.
Everything that the county and the city want from me, I will always say no. Isn't it clever? They came up with an idea for another homeless tax. I mean, anything that they can do to leverage our emotions, leverage our fears, and they do that so that we allow them to spend more money. And at some point, we're going to be taxed right out of the state if people haven't been already. So I keep an eye out for those all the time. I also there's interesting things in LA County that present themselves as well, where they want to expand representation with the LA County Board of Supervisors. These things that again will cost taxpayers more money, and will it get us any better service? Probably not.
Okay, Katie.
My city's so devious that just in case Proposition 2, the school bond fails, we have one of our own on the local ballot. Yeah, they want to authorize $543 million of bonds for the Sacramento City
Wow.
schools because of leaky roofs.
That's just in one city.
One city.
Not even that big a city. I mean,
Nope.
that's amazing. I actually don't have any. I mean, unless I'm missing something. I've got on my one is just the state initiatives. Nothing. I know they were going to do a Bay Area bond on, I don't know what that or transportation. I think.
Regional Measure 4, it was going to be a $20 billion housing bond in it was going to raise property taxes in 9 Bay Area counties.
Ooh.
And the polling was so bad, they pulled it off the ballot before it was
Yeah.
printed. So, yeah.
Well, also, is it also the case that they wanted it off the ballot in the hope that they can pass Prop whatever it is 5, right?
Right.
So
Well,
that
it would
they
have
need a
needed
lower threshold next time.
Yes.
exactly. It would have needed a 2/3 vote, but Prop 5 is instantly retroactive. So everything on the ballot with it at the same time that needs a 2/3 would need 55% instead. But even they couldn't even get to
We could even get
55% and they're
55.
right, so they just pulled it.
Interesting.
They will
Um,
try again. Beware, they will try again.
yeah, no more, no on bonds, no on tax increases, no for all of this stuff. No on more government. We have way too much. As I say all the time, we are the most overgoverned, overtaxed, overregulated, over-litigated state in America. No, it's too much already. I've got one last question, which is if people have, which I do here, um, a race where, okay, preface. Again, this is something I say the whole time. I invite any of you three to disagree with me. If we want change in California, there isn't, you have all these people made these arguments that, oh, well, moderate Democrats are going to help and whatever. No, there's only one way, and that is to elect Republicans at every level of the ballot. The Republicans on the ballot may not be exactly to our taste. There may be some that we slightly disagree with on certain things, but generally speaking, where you have a choice for, and it's a partisan thing, vote Republican. I mean, to me, that's very straightforward. However, sometimes it's you have two Democrats because of our ridiculous top two system, and sometimes it's nonpartisan. So, any thoughts on how to evaluate for people? Again, we can't go through everyone's. Um, how would a voter go about evaluating which Democrat out of two, if it's a top two race, and some of these nonpartisan ones, where there's quite a few here, where you just don't have no idea who these people are.
Check endorsements. It's my number one rule for any candidate. If you don't know the candidate, check who endorses them. And if they live up to your ideology, go for it. If not, I think it's really the best way to decide. We have a lot of races in California, congressional races, especially in Los Angeles, where you have two Democrats voting against each other. Typically, I like to shake it up and vote the incumbent out. But in many
That's a good
cases,
one.
the Democrats who are in there are actually more moderate than some of the, I mean, for a lack of a better word, crackpots that are running against them that are even more far left because they're the ones that are getting some steam to try to challenge them because that party has changed its face. So I say look at endorsements. I do like to break it up if it's an incumbent, sometimes shake it up, but you got to be careful. You really, so in these two Democrat races, sometimes the person who is not the incumbent can actually be worse.
And so when you say endorsements, you're thinking things like unions, bad sign,
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
unions, organizations, you can tell a lot. Usually if there's something on there called the Democrat Socialists of America, I might just go on to the next. You see those endorsements quite a lot. Anything that has to do with socialism or the Communist Party of Cerritos or something, I might actually just keep moseying if I see that endorsement.
So there you need to do a bit of work. You need to look it up because it's not on the ballot here. You need
Right.
to
It's
go
usually
to
on
a
their
website.
website. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Katie?
I do much the same thing. I always look at endorsements, and sometimes I'll take it a step further and go look up their financial records, the contributions that they have to file with the state.
Where do you do that?
I do it on the Secretary of State's website.
Yeah, it's Cal Access on the Secretary of State's website.
Okay. Susan, any thoughts on this?
You can find the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association endorsements and the legislative report card, how they voted on taxpayer issues if they're an incumbent, at hjta.org. And also at the Southern California News Group papers, we do endorsements. So dailynews.com, ocregister.com, pressenterprise.com, presstelegram.com. You can find the endorsement editorials based on interviews with candidates and their opponents at all those newspapers. And I'll vouch for that. It's a very good process that we have there, where we talk to people and see what they're about and what they want to do. Some of the incumbents are just terrifyingly stupid, and it's a good thing to get rid of them. It's a good thing to have checks and balances in the
Yes.
legislature. And that's one good reason to vote for the opposing party, because if we have checks and balances in the legislature, they'll fight it out there and we don't have to do everything ourselves, which is the way it is now.
I know. By the way, I do love that. Some of them are terrifyingly stupid. I think that's just
Yes.
what a
Yes.
quote. Okay.
There was one who was voting on energy policy in the state of California who said she can tell that there is price gouging because she drives by the same gas station in Chatsworth, California every day, and she sees those prices go up and down and there's no reason for it.
Oh my God. It's so
So how is Kamala Harris?
Frightening.
all right, last thing, I then we'll leave it. This has been fantastic. I mean, what about the actual process now of voting that's so complicated? I mean, I'm looking at this thing here, this enormous thing that with all these graphics. I mean, what are you? I mean, can I tell you my instinct, and tell me if that's wrong, is to do it. Is to but literally, I'm going to do it today. We've just had this conversation. I don't have anything other than I don't have local things. I don't. There's a couple of these. I'm going to now go and check the endorsements for some of the non-partisan ones and the two Democrats. And then my instinct is to go to the place physically because I like to go and vote. But so different to what I might have done in the past. Actually, don't wait till election day. Do it now so that it's definitely in there. But do it physically. I don't know. Am I wrong to not want to just put it in the post or the Dropbox, or what do you think about all that?
Well, you can use ballot tracks, which is pretty good. You can register to track your ballot at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. And you can sign up. They'll send you an email when your ballot is mailed to you. They'll send you an email when it's received and when it's counted. And if you don't get that email, then you can contact your registrar of voters in your county and say, my ballot's lost. I didn't get any confirmation that it was received. And they'll be able to check for you and see if it was. So that's the best way to be sure that it was received. I think people should not wait till election day unless they want to, but many people wait for election day and then they don't bother. And that is where we can really get into trouble,
Yes.
because you turn on the television in the morning, they tell you what the polls show. It's like it's all over and people don't bother. And in California, you can't just pay attention to the national races. You have to look at all of these things that are going to take your money from you if you don't vote them down. It's really important to get down into the weeds and vote against the bonds and the tax increases if you don't want those, because if you skip voting, they will pass.
Everything's a tight race. You've got congressional candidates who will win by 333 votes. You have people that will win ballot initiatives that will just pass by. And so to answer your question, Steve, I want to vote in person on election day. That's all I trust. But I've already voted. I voted. I sent it in. I used a ballot tracker. It's one of the best things that California gives to us as voters so that we can make sure that our ballots are counted. And by the way, that works if you vote in person too, so that you can make sure that your vote was counted. It will show you that you voted and that it was calculated. So I would use that tool. But the reason I say we have to start voting early is that we have to play by the rules that the Democrats have set if we ever want to win. And I would tell you to look in Orange County right now, because Orange County today, I think at the same point in the election in 2020, Democrats had a 15,000 vote advantage in Orange County. Today, because Republicans are voting early, I think that advantage is around 1,000. That's huge. We need to change our behaviors as voters. We need to do it, show up, whether you're going to do it in person or not. I say vote early, and you can vote early in person so that we can spend resources. As you know, Republicans are grossly overspent by Democrats on everything, on every race, everything we care about. Someone against us is spending more money. So we have to use our resources wisely, which means if we vote early and our vote is checked off, the campaigns for propositions or for congressional candidates can come to your door and turn out low propensity voters, which is going to help us win in some of these tight races.
Yes, and that's a really important point. And especially, I've been going around supporting these candidates, and they're so short of money compared to the Democrats. The Democrats have the unions and so on, that if they're not wasting time chasing you up with a
Right.
text or an app, whatever, then that's resources and time, and time's the most precious resource that the candidates and their campaigns can spend on getting people who haven't done it yet. Katie.
I was gonna I was gonna recommend the same. I just got my ballot, just opened it up. I'm gonna fill it out, send it in immediately, and then of course the the California Republican Party doesn't have to spend any money on me anymore. And I tell people who ask, every vote matters. Absolutely every vote counts. And as Susan and Jen said, even if there's candidates you don't vote for in your ballot, you make sure you vote for the ballot initiatives, vote for your local races. I am faced with a mayoral race in Sacramento between a socialist and a communist. It's a tough one this year, but I'm for sure going to vote no on all the bond measures. So
I just want to underline, please, please go and vote. This is, we've talked a lot about the measures, but the candidates, we've been featuring them on this show every week. We've got a few more to come. We've got some fantastic candidates for state legislature. It's going to be very tight. We still have this supermajority, but, every step forward counts. And we've got some opportunities to win some races. Joanna Garcia Rose in the Central Valley, Christy Bruce Lane down in San Diego, Jeff Gonzalez, in down in Imperial County and Riverside. You've got and that's just a few. And if you watch the show, we'll put out clips from all of them. And then the other thing, it's so important, control of the House, keeping the House majority. It could be all about California. Yesterday I was down in Orange County with supporting Scott Bohr with Speaker Johnson, and this is really important what happens here. We've got these very, very tight races: Michelle Steele, Young Kim, Mike Garcia, David Valadeo, John Duarte, and of course Scott Paul. These are really Ken Calvert.
yeah.
These are all really, really crucial races. So if you're in a place where those are the candidates, you have to go vote for them.
Absolutely. And I think, especially just to underscore the importance of those congressional races, the balance of power in the House will run through the state of California. I feel more confident for Republicans looking at the Senate than I do at Congress right now, looking at the House of Representatives. Each and every one of those votes will matter. And if you are a hardcore Trump person, or if you want to see Trump in the White House, don't think for a minute, if Democrats are in charge of the House, that impeachment will not start again on day one. It is crucial to
I
get
was
out
going
and
to make
vote.
that exact same point. Brilliant. I think we've covered it all. Does anyone want a final word, Susan, or you happy to let it rest, as they say in court, or I'll
I
rest
I
my
would
case?
like to urge
Yes.
everyone to contact everyone in your address book. Contact your friends by phone, by email, on social media, and let them know, particularly about some of these nonpartisan tax issues. Because even though people are fighting like cats and dogs on the partisan stuff, we are all taxpayers. And if you let them know what some of these things are, they will vote, and they'll know what they're voting on, instead of opening the ballot and thinking, I don't know what any of this is, and throwing it out. They'll vote on the things that will affect their kids in many cases, because these bonds are 30 and 40 years. So let them know what these tax related things are, even if you don't agree on the presidential race.
Fantastic. Katie?
I do something similar in my neighborhood. I send one email to my across the street neighbor who has a network of moms in the neighborhood who just need information about the ballot initiatives. They pretty much know who the candidates are in our local races, but the ballot initiatives are mystery. So I send my recommendation out, and then she sends it out. I even offer to pick up people's ballots and drop them off for them. Just anything we can do to get more people to vote.
Very good. Yes, let's harvest away. We may hate these rules, but they are the rules, so we got to play by them and win. Brilliant. Thank you. So what a fantastic, I really loved that. That was great. Thank you very much. I was a little bit worried about the logistics with four of us, and it was just perfect because
Well,
you're all such professionals. And of course, make sure you follow everyone here, our friends. Katy Grimes, editor-in-chief of California Globe. You've got to go to California Globe for all your news about California. Jen Horn, AM 870, The Morning Answer. You hear me there every Friday, but you should listen all the time. Susan Shelley, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. She's given you the information there. And of course, follow and social media. Susan's always doing these great articles, sometimes in the New York Post and in Orange County Register and elsewhere. So fantastic to see you all. We'll see you back individually in our regular episodes, but thank you everyone for doing this today. It was fantastic. And thank you for joining us for this special episode of the Steve Hilton Show. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you back here next week.